Greetings from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. What comes to your mind when you think of an old-fashioned garden? I imagine climbing roses, tumbling over a trellis, or a stand of hollyhocks, 7 to 10 foot tall, just stretching across a white picket fence or an old worn picket fence. Or a patch of poppies with blue forget-me-nots sprinkled across. Or sweet peas, their little tendrils curling around some wire fencing. There were gardens like that in my childhood, and they were not my grandmother's or my mother's gardens, but they were our neighbors' gardens. In fact, every day on my way to school, I would pass a house with hollyhocks, snapdragons, sweet peas, all of them growing along the sidewalk on the fence. And I would take extra care to walk very slowly and really take in every bit of those beautiful old-fashioned flowers. Today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about planting antique flowers. And antique flowers would be classified as anything over 100 years old. But I think we're going to go even farther back than that with the flowers that we choose today. And we're going to be planting them in a series on the antique flowers. We're going to be planting them from seed. And if you have a cottage garden, or you just love an old-fashioned garden, or if you're a gardener that has a penchant for the past, I think you will love antique flowers in your garden. Out by planting the hollyhocks and the foxglove today. So let's start with the hollyhocks. And I'm going to be using photographs out of books and some photographs that were taken in my garden last year. This obviously is not my house. I wish. I wish it was. But it's not. This is a garden in England with beautiful red hollyhocks growing. Also, I've moved into the house where it's a little quieter, into the garden room we are right now, just to keep the screeching of the peacocks to a minimum. The hollyhock originated in East Asia, specifically Japan, and then it was brought to the Middle East. And this is where the Crusaders found the plant, discovered it, and brought the plant to Britain. Because the plant was so similar to the British English hawk, or also called a mallow, they called it hollyhock, or, as it has come to be known, hollyhock. At least that's one explanation of the name hollyhock, but there are quite a few others as well. Another story was that the Crusaders used a salve from the hollyhock to treat the Crusaders' horses' hocks, their hind legs, and it became known as holy hawk, as in the hind legs of the horse. I think I like the other explanation a lot better. It's a very adaptable and forgiving plant. It will take clay, acid, alkaline. It prefers sun. It'll grow up to 10 feet tall, which is why it's a great backdrop plant. But if you see them smack in the middle of a garden, that's pretty impressive too. Pretty rare to find a painting of a cottage from the last century that doesn't have a stand of hollyhocks growing up against a wall or a fence. Hollyhocks bloom from the bottom up, and they have a very long display of color that can last several weeks. The varieties, the old-fashioned varieties, grow from 8 to 12 feet tall, but the hybrids, which you can get, can grow only 2 to 8 feet tall. So it depends on what you want. I prefer the old-fashioned ones because I'm a lover of history and antique gardens. You can see that the colors, varieties, are anywhere from pale pinks and whites all the way down to bright reds and even a burgundy. I tried to grow a black hollyhock once. And here we have little hollyhock dolls, something that's fun to make. The hollyhock was actually mentioned in a poem copied in a manuscript in 1440. That's how old the hollyhock is. This little lovely lady, it's called a Sabrina hollyhock, also known as mallow actually. And these have much smaller blooms, but they're pretty profuse, and I've grown these successfully for quite a few years in the garden. So what you would be looking for would be the Sabrina hollyhock. Hollyhocks are loved by butterflies and hummingbirds, and they're also a host plant to caterpillars. They bloom from April to July, and if you get a nice stand of hollyhocks, you can just allow that plant to go to seed and let it drop its own seed, and pretty soon you will have a whole flock of hollyhocks. Or if you prefer not to have them dropping seed, you can also just prune them about 6 inches from the ground and let them come up the next year, because they are biennials, and I talked about biennials before. So let's go plant some hollyhock seed. Let's start out by planting some hollyhocks in pots, which will eventually be transplanted into the garden. And these seeds are readily available. You can get them in the double hollyhock or the antique single hollyhock in many pastel colors. And also a little, once in a while you can find a beautiful dark burgundy and even an almost black hollyhock. So we're going to need some pots. And I'm pretty partial to these old-fashioned clay pots. I just like them because they're classics. But you can also get some fun clay pots, like this one. Or you can get some colorful pots with nice graphics on them. Whatever you want. And then you want to cover your drainage holes a little bit. You want these plants to get good drainage, so just some stones or some broken crockery at the bottom of your pot. That's all you need. Hollyhocks like to stay moist, but they don't want to sit in water. They don't want to get dry. Now also, I collected these hollyhock seeds last year, so I can also use these if I so desire, but I think I'll just plant these directly into the garden. Just want to take some potting soil or some compost and fill up your pots. Now moisten the soil pretty well. Let's just take a look at the hollyhock seeds. You can see that they look like little wafers. Now you see these are the tall hollyhocks that we're going to be planting today, and these extremely tiny ones are from some seed I collected last year, which is the Zebrina hollyhock. Now before you break it apart, it looks like a little donut like this. Then you break those apart and the little wafers fall off like this. So the Zebrina hollyhock is a much smaller flower, not as showy, but also very pretty in the garden. But we want to plant these large ones today. And it's very simple because all we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle them right on the surface of the soil. And don't be stingy because a lot of these won't germinate. So we will be very generous with our seed. And we're just going to sprinkle them on top of the surface, and you are going to have to keep these moist every day, otherwise they will not germinate. Now let me show you what to expect. Within anywhere from 10 to 14 days. There's a little platter of hollyhocks that I put in the peat pots. And these were planted 3/29, and you can see they're still at different stages of development. Some of them are just now coming up. These tiny ones right here. And some of them are actually doing really well and almost ready to sprout their true leaves. So this is what your little seedlings will look like, and obviously not all of them will germinate. This is just what happens. You might get a 50% germination rate, a 70% germination rate, and that's why you want to put 2 seeds in every pot. And sometimes you won't even get 1, and sometimes you might get 3. Must have put 3 in that pot. But just keep these in a warm spot, and they need light to germinate, which is why you're planting them right on top of the surface of the soil, and then make sure you keep them moist. Put them in a windowsill or on a nice protected place on your porch. So let me show you what they look like after they've been growing for a little while. These are a little bit older. They self-seeded in a garden where I had a large hollyhock that I let it drop its seed. They're in different stages of growth here, but they've got their true leaves, as you can see. There's the baby leaf, and here are the true leaves. And the true leaves are very textured, lacy little circles. I think they're really pretty leaves. This one's way ahead of the others. It's gotten quite tall already. And they're just, I just let them self-seed in this little garden here in the potager up against a wall because they will get very tall. You don't want them out in the middle of your garden, I don't think. They make a great backdrop. And then across, there's a much taller plant. It also self-seeded over here across the walkway into this little herbal bed, which is chamomile and oregano, but I think I'm going to dig this one up and move it up against the fence because it will get quite tall and look kind of silly standing here by itself. So I'll very carefully dig as much of the soil out of that as I can using a fork. Our second antique flower that we'll be planting today is the foxglove. The scientific name is Digitalis purpurea, and it is a native of Europe, but it's been transported to every corner of the globe. And I'm so glad. I had great success with my foxglove last year, and I want to share that success with you. I want you to be able to grow these magnificent plants in your own garden. Foxglove also come in many different colors. Nothing really dark though. Usually they're more the pastel pinks and peaches and whites, purples and lavenders. Caution when considering growing foxglove, because every part, the seeds, the leaves, the stems, the flowers, every part of the foxglove is toxic. And that's good and that's bad, because the drug digitalis is extracted from the leaves and used in treatment of heart disease. But of course, if taken in too large an amount, would not be very healthy, due to the fact that it does have toxic qualities. It had a few more sinister names other than foxglove, such as bloody man's fingers, dead man's bellows, dragon's mouth, fairy fingers, finger hut, and witch's thimble. Now when I think of foxglove, I tend to think of something not quite ominous like that. I tend to think of Beatrix Potter and Jemima Puddle Duck, because there were many, many foxgloves in these paintings. Foxgloves having long been associated with foxes, and that's because in the wild they tend to grow in places that foxes are likely to frequent. And of course this wasn't lost on Beatrix Potter, who was a naturalist as well as an artist. Okay, good baby. So as long as we're on the subject of ducks and foxgloves, I wanted you to meet one of my new babies. I purchased some ducklings from the farm store because my mother duck, all 19 of her eggs were stolen in the middle of the night. And so I wanted more ducklings because we really have a shortage of female ducks. And not only that, now I'm able to finish this illustration here with foxgloves and little ducklings. And I'll have these beautiful little babies to look at when I paint. Thank you for being so good. Okay, you want to go back with your family? Okay. All right. Just like hollyhocks, foxglove bloom from the bottom up. And they bloom from late spring to early summer. They also make excellent cut flowers, but they only last in the vase for about 6 days. Cottagers, however, used to take the cut up flower bouquets and add to make foxglove tea, not to drink, but to add to the vase water to extend the life of other flowers in the arrangement. I don't know if that works yet, but I'm going to give it a try this time. And of course you can buy foxglove in the garden centers, but you're going to get a lot more for your money if you start them from seed. And just one foxglove will produce 2 million seeds for your garden, and you'll have foxgloves for life. They like shade, partial shade, or full sun. In the humidity of East Tennessee and the heat of certain places, I think they're better off in a partial shade area. So let's go plant some wonderful foxglove, one of my very favorite flowers. Today's second antique seed that we're planting today is the foxglove, and this majestic and superb species is just something that I always think about when I think of cottage gardens, castle gardens, gardens in the woods. As a matter of fact, the name foxglove came from the folklore that the tubular bloom of the foxglove fit exactly perfectly on a fox's little paw, and he would place these on his 4 paws, and as he was stalking his prey, he could walk quietly through the forest, not to be heard. Very, very tiny. This is like sand. My goodness, this is like sand. It's so minute that really it would be impossible for you to just place these in one by one. So what you're just going to do is you're going to sprinkle them on the surface of a tray. In this case, I'm using a 1.5-inch seed tray with drainage holes in the bottom, and I'm using compost in this case, but you could also use your potting mix. I'm just going to lightly, come on, very carefully sprinkle these hither and thither all around my tray. And as these grow a little bit, as the seedlings grow, and they'll look like they're really grouted in there, they probably will be. I'm going to do the whole packet. We will thin them out. Now let's take a look at some very young foxglove here so that you know what to look for as they start coming up. Here we have a very tiny one right here. So it's almost a lime green little leaf with a lot of texture and kind of fuzzy as well, kind of soft and fuzzy. And you can see how full they get even at a very young age. I'm going to keep these in these deep trays right now until they get about 4 or 5 inches tall. Then I'm going to transplant these into the garden, and they will grow in the garden and they will get big and bushy. They will not produce any flowers this year, and they will grow all winter long, even in the snow. So depending on your climate, of course, we're pretty mild here in East Tennessee, but this is really something, if you're going to sow it in your garden, it's recommended to sow it in late summer or fall. So here's a nice little cluster of foxglove growing in one of the gardens, and these were from seed that the mother plant just dropped, and that's why they're so cluttered together here, because the seeds seem to have all dropped in the same place, and I might want to go in there and thin these out a little bit. And here we are in another garden where a foxglove from last year reseeded itself, and we've got patches of little ones coming up all over the place. So you see what I mean when I'm saying that if you can get your foxglove started the first time, you will have plants for many, many years to come, because they just keep on having babies. Today we're taking a luncheon tea right here next to my potting area on the porch right off the potager. And it's been a rather brisk, about a 60-degree day, so it's really perfect for gardening, and it's still perfect for soup. And this is going to be a really healthy and colorful meal. Sometimes when I'm outside and a car goes by, it sounds like a jet plane is flying overhead, but it's really, really not. And you know, we live off, it's a little country road, but this camera just picks up every single sound. So hopefully I won't have too many cars passing by as I'm doing this video. But let me show you this gorgeous, gorgeous dinnerware. So beautiful and spring-like. I use it all summer long. Let's start it with this beautiful dinner plate with the foxglove on it, Digitalis purpurea, one of the antique flowers that we planted seeds for today. And this dinnerware is made by Botanic Garden, Portmeirion, not sure how to pronounce it, made in Stoke-on-Trent in England. And I just think the artwork on the plates is absolutely wonderful. Each plate has a different flower and little insects, butterflies, bees, dragonflies, all sorts of wonderful little things. And the scientific name, as well as the common name, is on each plate, portraying the flower. There are little dessert bowls, soup bowls, dinner bowls, teapots, teacups, hydrangea. This beautiful, pleasant, spring-like and summer-like dinnerware. Just makes you almost not want to put anything on the plate. But we're going to put things on these plates because we have a lot of good healthy food here today. Today's Hardy & Sons tea is called Mother's Bouquet, and it's a floral tea. Comes in a sachet. And it is caffeine-free with a blend of flowers accented with orange flavors. It says on the can that this aromatic bouquet honors all mothers and their valued efforts for their families. So 3 cheers and bravo for all mothers across the world, including my 93-year-old mother, who I wish was sitting here having tea with me today, but she's clear across the country. So in this tea is chamomile, rose, cornflowers, orange rind, and natural orange flavor. And as I said, it comes in a sachet. A delightful scent is in this can, and we'll steep it for 5 minutes. Actually, when it comes to herbal tea, I almost would rather steep it for a lot longer than that, because herbal teas are so mild that to really get the full flavor, I prefer just leave the tea bag in. So we'll check this as we go along. See how much more flavorful it gets the longer we let it sit. Today's absolutely elegant and stunning teapot was made by Manning and Bowen in the mid-19th century, and these kind of teapots were actually hotelware, and that's one of the reasons that the teapots are so large, and they also have coffee pots, and they held an awful lot of water, coffee, and tea. And these were made with enamelware, with designs, and also pewter. and silver plate. So James had these huge, enormous carrots. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And so I looked for a recipe in the herbal book and found this creamed carrot soup, which is really, really good. What really makes this delicious is the ginger, the cream, and the carrots. That's what you can taste the most of. Now, I also added to this a mashed up sweet potato because I didn't think that mine was thickening up enough. But you don't have to do that. But I just happen to have one. So this really is yummy. It's pretty. It's something different to do with your carrots. And usually most of the carrots here either get they're treats for the donkeys, who really appreciate them, or they are cooked with butter. The avocado tuna I thought sounded like a little odd. I didn't know what avocado and tuna would taste like. And I actually doubled the avocado in this recipe. And I would recommend you don't put in the mustard. I really, really could taste it. It was really very strong. Unless you really like the taste of mustard, I think I would leave that out. You can also replace the cider vinegar with lemon juice, and that will prevent the avocado from turning brown, which has a tendency to do if it sits for even the slightest amount of time. But you can wrap it up in romaine lettuce, or you can eat it in pita bread or on toast or anything you like. So you will have noticed that we don't have any sweets on the table today. But don't worry, we will make up for that in the next video, when I'm going to make some very splendid desserts. And as far as the Mother's Bouquet Harney & Sons floral tea, I would say that when I'm sipping this tea, I close my eyes and try to grasp what flavors I'm really noticing. And with this, it's just mostly the chamomile and just a tiny hint of orange. So I wouldn't recommend spending a lot of money on Harney & Sons floral tea, because on Mother's Day I'm going to introduce you to a wonderful Mother's Bouquet tea from another company that is well worth spending your money on. So in the meantime, in Hopalong Hollow, I hope you will go out and get those antique flower seeds that I told you about, and get them in pots. And especially you mothers and you grandmothers that tell me that you are enjoying tea and gardening with your granddaughters and your daughters. So from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry, and we'll see you next time, and we will be planting another antique flower. Bye-bye.